Okay, guys, welcome back. Today we have a director of AI and data strategy at ThoughtWorks with us, but he's also a musician who sings with a piano on leading AI conferences in the world. So let's welcome together Tiankai Feng. Hi, Tiankai. Welcome
Hi,
to have you
Mario.
here. How
Yeah,
are you
it's great
doing?
to be
All good?
here. It's all good. I'm good. I'm very excited to be here. I've seen some of your recordings already with other guests, so very excited to talk to you.
Nice. Okay, cool. So what I always like to start with is that the people in like an elevator pitch style just quickly say why they do what they do, and so that like if you would tell it to another person, what do you do and why do you do it?
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I would say I help my clients and other people with their data and AI problems from a strategic angle. That means that it's all about how to drive value with data and AI, how to work together on data and AI, and how to actually get excited about data and AI. That's very much in a nutshell. So yeah, in that way, right? I do that through my consulting, but I do that also by giving keynotes and do some public speaking gigs. But I also like to coach people, mentor people, and that kind of things.
Okay. And is that a hard job, would you say?
Well, I mean, hard is always relative, right? I would say that I have a strong intuition for solving problems and for helping people. So no matter what, I'm very eager to find solutions to problems. In that way, that comes easily to me. But the space of data and AI is very complex, right? So
Okay.
doing research and finding out what is the newest trend and what are the newest possible ways to solve problems is not always easy, but I like that balance, right? Where I have the strong drive plus the challenge of finding out things. So in that way, it's really nice.
I guess your job is more organizational or is it also technical? Do you code in your job?
I don't code much in my job. I need to understand code a little bit, though, at least, right? So at least from an architectural point of view and how things are set up, right? So, but I spend more time, of course, organizationally and architecturally, etc., etc.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is I had some discussions with people, especially who are very deep in data. And I mean, of course, there will be some people who agree that it's quite important to have governance in place and a strategy. But on the other side, also some people might say that creates like a bottleneck or like just overhead because you have to have so many discussions about why do you use this data and so on. Like, what's your perspective? Like, do most people find it easy to understand why governance is necessary, or is this a hard job in that case to explain that?
Yeah. I think, I mean, I usually would talk about governance as a way to solve problems and prevent problems, right? So just to put governance in place and put like quality checks and certain checkpoints for compliance in place just to do it is kind of useless, right? Because nobody gets why to do it. And then you just put it in place and everyone feels slowed down and stopped and blocked in many ways. So it has to come from a feeling of pain almost, right? So if you are feeling pain points with data quality, then governance is partially the answer. If you're risking of getting fined or getting someone to jail because you're doing something illegal, then governance is also part of the answer, right?
Of course.
So in a way, I will always try to combine it with something that is meaningful and that we all need to agree is actually the right thing to do, right? Where it gets tricky, of course, is because in governance, many times some people changing their behavior and doing things differently is not beneficial from themselves, but it's beneficial for someone else in the organization. So you need to kind of address the intrinsic motivation to help others instead. But in organizational setups, especially culturally, it's not always that easy, right? So the more people are expected to work for themselves and only do benefits for themselves, the harder it is to actually implement governance. And maybe one last point, right? I get the point about stopping things with governance and you have to discuss a lot of things. I find that the best way of doing governance is embedding it into guardrails, right? And not so much doing it manually and having discussions about it. If you make it hard to do something wrong in the systems itself, then people have it easier to do the right things, right? So you can put in policies in place that are stopping you from putting in certain things or to make certain transformations or gives you a checklist. It's much easier that way than for everyone to say, please talk to me, you did something wrong, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like this way of doing more automated governance is much better.
Okay, you hit my sweet spot of speaking about things like automating. So
Yeah.
I would actually be curious, like because I think we at some point will, maybe we are already in it. We will hit a moment in time where we're kind of doing AI and data governance, but at the same time, AI and data is helping us to make governance better, right? So you sort of have to need governed data that then helps us govern other data to make better governed AI. And I was just curious, like, because I think most people have no idea about this. I also really don't have too much. I only built like semi-automated things in the past, or worked really with dashboards where people had to look at 5,000 duplicates and then deduplicate it by themselves, which is a pain, obviously. But we are now in 2025. So what are maybe like innovations, AI innovations or similar in the field of governance that you are very excited about, that you see also a lot of benefit in?
I think, what has existed already for a while now is a smarter ways of doing data profiling and data discovery, right? So what that means is you have a complete new data set that you have not worked on and classified yet. And it helps you, for example, just identify that certain types of certain data types, right? For example, this column looks like an address, right? So this was probably the address attribute. This column looks like a birth date. So that's probably the birth date attribute. Or same with like product attributes like colors or like materials, whatever, right? So these pre-trained models, they have generic knowledge about already what kind of data should look like, right? So it gives you a really strong recommendation. This column is 99% this type of format. So it's probably address. Do you want to take it over? And that makes it easier, right? Imagine you have like hundreds of columns and you don't have to manually check every column anymore to assign what it is, but it actually gives you already the recommendation of what to do. That has existed for a while now, right? But the other side of it, I would say, is, for example, data quality rules. And that's a bit more newer, so it would have a nuance where it checks for outliers, checks for patterns in the values itself, and kind of gives you ideas to say, well, this is usually, let's say, 5 letters long, but now there's like few entries with 1,000 letters and a few entries with only 1 letter. Is that the right thing, right? And then it checks out and gives you directly the outliers, and you have to do something with it, or it gives you a recommendation to maybe correct it in a certain way as well. What I think maybe is much more cutting edge and new is LLM-based policy implementation, right? Imagine that you have policies that are usually written in like boring legal text, right? It's like, this policy is ensuring that blah, 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 and that people cannot do blah, 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 and blah, 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 and they're supposed to do blah, blah, blah. And translating that in the past into code was very hard. But now you have LLMs, right? They actually can get prompted to say, can you please read this, identify what that means in this specific technology stack, and could you implement guardrails into the code of either access rights or kind of anonymization features, for example, and how would you suggest it to do it? Best case scenario can even generate a vibe code for you, right? And you can directly get started. So you jump over the whole translating and meeting thing and just directly comes up with a suggestion. At least you can start easier. So I'm very excited about that part, right? Where all of the natural language based things can now easily be translated into machine readable code, and then you can just get started much quicker.
For sure, yeah. I'm also very excited about that part, like, because it can be so helpful to... I actually thought about that yesterday, right? Like, because what is the thing with code? For me personally, I mean, I know a lot of people whose only job is to write code. Obviously, I understand they love coding. Yeah. Right? But if you think about what code actually also does to an organization, oftentimes it's like a barrier, right? And especially when you write code, like I thought about that, like why would I write code myself if I could ask a LLM to do it? Exactly. The only situation I would run into, I would think, maybe I'm wrong, right? Of course, right? There can be errors in the code, and that's for sure something you need to check. But everything beyond that, I was just like thinking, at the end of the day, I just get attached to my code, you know? So if I have to change it because something is broken, and I had these discussions in the past with developers, right? Where they were like saying, yes, but I spent like 3 hours to write this. Do you really want me to change it now? But that's a very understandable response. But at the same time, right, that's not the way to the solution. So I think like just being able to say, hey, this part is wrong, right? And then it will just like fix itself, I think is very powerful. And just curious how good it will actually work in the real world and how much accepted it will.
That is very true. I think, though, there's also a cultural aspect to it, right? Because how precious you are about your code also says something about how you're being acknowledged and how your performance is measured in the company is, for example, right? And if you define your impact in the organization too much only by the code you've written or how much time you wrote in the code, then it's not as impactful as measuring it by how much is being used and how much it led to certain revenue metrics. For example, right? And if you're focusing on the bigger picture, right, then maybe you get a little more detached from the code itself, and you're looking more into solutions, what else can help achieve the big picture that you can contribute to it, rather than sticking to the specific repositories on GitHub, for example, right, that you're very pressed about. More about, I mean, I have worked a lot on code, but actually I think the code from the other guy and combined with the code from this guy, with my help to be integrated, helps much more with this. And then you have that more. In the age of AI, we are anyway delegating a lot to basically automated solutions in the future, right? So all we have left is our critical thinking and us as human beings thinking about bigger picture that no one is prompting us, but we proactively think about, right? So I think that has to change anyway.
Yes.
It's a cultural thing.
For sure, for sure. 100% agree with that. And maybe because you're like dealing also with like the governance of AI solutions, is there any specific interesting like project? Of course, you don't have to disclose the name and anything like this, but like anything where you really had the feeling, wow, like, doing governance really is like needed here, you know, because we all, I think, sometimes have the moment in our jobs where we're thinking like, okay, well, yeah, I'm kind of like producing some type of value, but not sure if it really is like helping everyone or everyone gets it. But what was a situation where you really were in governance and you had the feeling, wow, I had a big impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest impact I usually have is actually from preventing risk. That is the most direct impact you get. And by that, I mean a few use cases I worked on now, which are customer service support with AI, right? And whenever you put a chatbot in place, or like even like an audio chatbot that is on a phone service now, and a hotline, right, for customers, the thing is, how do you avoid that people with bad intentions can do something malicious through that chatbot, right? Like basic, if you can now go to an insurance and you call them and you can ask for the data of another client and not yourself, and it just gives it to you, right? Then you have a big problem, right? That's like sensitive medical information plus money information. That's really bad. So putting those guardrails in and ensuring that a chatbot is actually ready to be used for the public and that bad people cannot do the things they want to do with it is really important, right? So this is where I feel like when you put governance in place, it actually helps with the world, right? You are avoiding crime and you are avoiding scammers. And you help the people, but to actually have quicker support, right? They don't have to wait 10 minutes anymore to get someone on the phone, but they can actually get simple things easier sorted by talking to a chatbot that's reliable and trustworthy, right? So
Yes.
I think anything that's related to customer interactions nowadays, support of AI, it always has that governance aspect, but on that side, it's always about avoiding that risk, but also supporting the good cause of it actually helping customers in the end. That's where it feels good.
Yeah, but that's such a powerful message, especially because like when you think about governance, and I think I would say not everyone that you will meet when you talk about governance will be as, let's say, up to date with like the current challenges, right?
True.
But you always are faced with people who tell you something about data quality and you're always like, yes, I know I have to write this name correctly and so on, which like feels always like a little bit like you're like, you know, like your child and some adult is telling you how to do your job. But if you really think about these like critical tasks that you mentioned, right, where really people can have malicious outcomes at the end of the day, I think that opens up also a whole another perspective on what governance really is, right? And I know that in academia, AI governance is very big. Like everyone talks about what could happen basically, right? But you somehow have to make sure that you're not like losing yourself in this philosophical, like endless spiral of coming up with other use cases, what could technically happen, because most people will say, but that's very unpragmatic, right? Like, but I'm not doing this, right? It cannot happen like this. We can think about any potential edge case now that could happen, but like, how do you ensure in your job that when you do this type of, like, let's say, risk projections, where you think about what risks could exist, that you stay, let's say, realistic, so that you like, you get the question.
That's a great question. I think, I mean, my short answer is data governance professionals or data teams cannot do it alone, right? Because they are data experts, but they're not experts in all of the sources where the risks come from, right? And by that, I mean legal experts, information security experts, data privacy experts, right? All these kind of people, they have a much different background than where data people actually are coming up with. So in a way, I feel like to actually have a realistic grasp on what are valid worries to have about risk and what are maybe a little bit more out there, has to be discussed together with those counterparts in other departments, right? So when we talk about compliance for new law, let's say the EU AI Act, right? Then of course I could say, oh my God, now we have to do all of that and we have to prevent being completely uncompliant and we have to now classify all of the AI models under risks, but it's going to be a huge effort. And then you can maybe check with a legal expert in your company first and say, what does it actually mean? Can you translate into simple words? And do you think what kind of solution is like the best to deal with this? And how can we do this more proactively in the future? So the best rooting in reality and grounding is talking to experts in your same organization and get their point of view and not just swim in it and try to figure it out yourself. I think collaboration really is the key here.
That kind of almost sounds like your book title, Humanizing
There you go.
Data Strategy, right?
Thanks for plugging it now.
Because I don't know if you noticed, but on the side I was trying to open the book cover, but Kindle only shows me the text, so people will not really know what to do with that. But maybe you wanna tell me about that, because you're one of the, let's say, few people I know who actually wrote a book, and I actually also read it, like Humanizing Data Strategy, because I
Thank you.
also research on AI and like human-centeredness. So I thought, like, how can data strategy be human-centered? So is there anything from that book, maybe particularly where you would say, yeah, these are maybe a few tools or like thoughts that people should take into their daily lives that would help them?
Absolutely. I mean, so maybe just a little bit of context to the book is that I wrote the book because I feel like that most of the issues and failures in data are rooted in human factors, right? Like bad human decisions, a lack of knowledge, bad collaboration, siloed expertise, all these kind of things are usually the reasons why things fail. So for that being such a big source of problems, it feels like that not many people write about it in a structured way, right? There's a lot of just, we all think it's important, but there are no details about actually how to make it better. So I gave it an attempt to basically write myself. And I came up with this framework of the 5 C's, which are rooted in human traits, right? That are competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience, right? And all of these are what we human beings already have as needs or as traits that we like to do. It's just more of a structured approach. I think what maybe I like, what fits to this conversation is what I call the framework for data purpose, right, in communication, which means it's a Venn diagram of 4 aspects. What is exciting to do, what is aligned with business objectives, what is allowed to do, and what is feasible to do. And all that says is, right, first of all, we all have great ideas, right? So we're excited about it, but then it needs to drive some kind of value. It just cannot be a random use case. It has to do something with the business that we're working in, right? Yes. What is allowed to do is ethical and compliantly if we're doing the right things. And what is feasible is, do we even have the right skills and the right technology to do it? Because if we're not mature enough yet in that case, then we cannot do it anyway, right? Yeah. So what it implies is if you find the middle of all the 4 aspects, then you have something that is likely to go through and you can easily basically make happen, right? At the same time, you need to talk to the different experts in your company to actually ensure that it answers the questions with a yes, and you cannot decide it on your own. And that basically avoids the aspect to start things and never finish, because usually it's being blocked by other departments, right? You start something in your own little corner, then you have this big use case, let's show it to the organization, and then you get all of the bad feedback, like this is not allowed, this is illegal, we cannot do this is not ready for production, etc., etc. So doing that kind of exercise to find the purpose means you're much more likely to succeed in your data efforts as well.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting. I think it's kind of similar to also how people in marketing and in product prototyping and so on evaluate ideas in a way. I mean, it has a totally different origin, like in that sense, right? Yours is more regulatory. The other ones are maybe more commercial oriented, but they also have these like viability, right? The business view. Right. Will this work? Is it like valuable for anyone, basically, economically or socially or whatever is the measure of value, right? Then feasibility, as you said, can it actually be done technically? Is it usable, right? Which is also a human-oriented thing. And then desirable, like, are people actually wanting that? Because you can build a lot of stuff that no one will ever use, and then no one will care if it's governed properly or not. Right. So true. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And the book idea, or like, how did you get the idea in the first place? And did you have the feeling it helped you personally in some way or form, being respected or something like this?
Absolutely. I mean, I did already talk about different human factors of data at conferences before already. That was kind of what I was passionate about. I started talking about it. It wasn't until I translated a book for Technics Publications, which was Disrupting Data Governance by Laura Madsen, into German. Where I got on the radar of the publisher, Technics Publications. So by the basic beginning of last year, they had asked me if I wanted to write my own book. And I was very excited about it. So I thought if a publisher already asks me to write a book, then I should not say no, right? This is like a chance of a lifetime. So I thought about what I would write about, and I decided that I've been talking about it so much, why not put it down on paper and to make a book out of it? And yeah, so I first came up with this framework of the 5 C's, and then I kind of fill in the gaps. And yeah, I came up with this book. Personally, I think it established me even more in the community as the expert on the human side of data than before. And it's funny because you notice it when people talk about it. Before, I was much more known for the music part that you mentioned now, right? But now I'm more called out as the author of Humanizing Data Strategy when I go to conferences. And that becomes more part of my external persona than the music part. So it's really interesting how the perception shifts the moment you have more a bigger milestone or something else that you're known for. How people describe you changes too, right? So I'm very proud to be called an author now. I never thought that would ever happen, but those 2 years now have really changed how I'm perceived and how I'm showing up at work and at conferences too.
So there's 2 paths my mind wants to go now. The first path, it's a short path, so let's go that first. Okay. Because it might be helpful for others as well, right? We are all trying, I think not all, but people who want, right? Like me, for example, we try to create content, right? And stuff like this. Obviously, maybe at some point, the content I created will be enough to create a book.
Right.
But I don't know when exactly you started to write the book. But my question is, did you in any way or form, like, did AI in any way or form help you with writing the book? Like, for example, writing like drafts for chapters or something like this? Or was it all human labor?
Yeah, in that case, it is actually all human labor. Because the main reason was I called it Humanizing Data Strategy. So I felt like I owed it to myself to not let AI write it. Simply because the book title is so present and so clearly pointing towards the direction that I wanted to do. But I give a little bit of a spoiler alert because I'm working on my second book now, right? Where it will be more about AI actually. But this is now the difference because now I feel like I need to show how human mindset and AI can work together to do things. So I'm starting to use it more, like using Claude for writing, using ChatGPT for doing some research on stuff and giving me like synthesis of things. It's really exciting, right? I mean, it's just, in many ways, I feel like I'm much faster and grasping things now, but it helps me also to accelerate my own thoughts and to basically jump from one point to the next. Yeah, it's a really exciting time now to be supported by AI.
Yeah, because I was just envisioning myself like reading a book, like, for example, about AI, right? And then maybe you have like, it would be such a funny situation to read it. And then maybe you have like one paragraph where you're like thinking to yourself, that sounds like ChatGPT, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then in the next paragraph, you will say something like, and now I show you like this other path where you explain basically what sounded like ChatGPT. Maybe you will expose that's also written with another AI, but you just prompted it differently. So it sounds like you.
Absolutely.
So just experience the change that the prompt or whatever model you will use like has on the readers also, and they realize it while reading it. That would be a crazy situation to be in, I think.
Right. It's like you're tricking the reader into not knowing what's happening, right? First you do this, and then like, this was actually written by AI, now this is written differently, and then, no, this was also written by AI. So
it's like the Matrushka, you know? So every time you have a new layer of AI, and no one knows anymore what's going on.
Exactly,
yeah. Cool. That would be pretty funny. And you actually brought up the other topic, didn't get there yet. But I was always wondering, like, you are also quite known for your music, right? Because you write some songs about data governance and other things. And I also mentioned you do concerts. And I do this as well. You probably have seen.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Very cool.
And the thing that I'm always like, I'm not concerned about, but sometimes other people tell me, you know, that you can seem kind of goofy very quickly. I didn't have the feeling that any person would treat me differently, because like if you do it good, right, you can sense creativity and like smartness in some degree at least. But did you ever have a situation where you had the feeling that like this identity of being this data musician guy, let's call you that, made you feel weird in a weird way, or did it have only positive effects in most cases?
I mean, I think mostly it's positive. That's the only reason why I would keep going, right? If it would really hurt me in my day-to-day business, then of course I would not do it anymore. But I don't think it comes from me being perceived as goofy, because people that have talked to me once know that I'm a positive, optimistic guy and I like to make jokes. So that is just not only my music, I'm just that kind of person. So in that way, it's also authentic, right? It's more about a certain type of jealousy I almost get. Because in a way, it helped me a lot in my personal branding and being present, right? And I would hear around the corner, not directly, but from people who hear about from others, that I'm only getting famous because of my data music, and that is not fair, right? That is kind of the statement. And it's an interesting one, because on the one hand side, I get like a little bit that sense of jealousy, right? If they could do it, they probably would do it. But on the other hand, I would say it's not a competition, right? Like, it's not like I'm telling everyone, don't do music. That's my area to do about data. I'm very happy about anyone like you making music about their job, right? This is super exciting, and it makes things more tangible. And if people can find their own ways of being creative and communicating around their job, and they're passionate about it, I'm not stopping them. No one is stopping them, right? So making this like a comparison between how I'm successful and they're not successful is not a valid comparison in the first place. So this is how I justify, at least in my head, that if they're jealous about it and they have bad things to say because of that reason, it's not my problem, it's their problem, right? They are not really balanced in their own ways of how they see things. And I cannot help people fix their own mindsets, right? That is definitely on them. And as long as I get mostly positive feedback and I'm getting invited to conferences to make live music and give concerts, right, for my keynotes, that's amazing for me, right? I will enjoy that wave as long as I can. And if I'm known for bringing entertainment and fun to conferences and to my talks, then I can only be happy about it.
A very healthy mindset, very healthy mindset. And I would say even if it would be a competition, right? It's only fair to use your strengths. Like, I mean, there are too many people on LinkedIn already who just like either copy someone else's content, or they will just repost their company's post and then just add "that's amazing" to it, and then everyone is like, wow, that's such a creative post. So I really appreciate if people have like original thoughts, right? And it can be whatever you are good at. Like if you're drawing, maybe you draw. I have a colleague who now recently created like an AI for writing children books, right? And people were like, yes, I can relate to that, even though it has absolutely to do anything with his job. Right, it's a human side of them. For me, right, music is also my thing. I'm also working on a AI-generated music video at the moment, which I think will be quite cool.
Nice.
Yeah, and
cool.
I think why not do it, right? Like people probably, hopefully, right, will see maybe something that they also thought about and see like a potential solution on how to do it. So I think it's totally fair. And it's also interesting that sometimes you have to be just a bit, and I think that's maybe also going into the direction for what tips maybe you could give to others who are younger than you, how they should get. But I think authenticity is quite important in that sense, right? Because, for example, I don't know if you saw it, but I posted a video last week where I reacted to the GTA 6 trailer. And people could surely like call me out for that and say like, Mario, you're 28 years old, you work. Why do you talk about GTA online and expose basically your childish side? Right, but I was like thinking there's so much.
But you made an analysis of why it was the right marketing moment. I loved it. That was so cool. You combined your passion with actually a rightful analysis from a marketing point of view. It was amazing. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, but you know where I'm trying to go to, right? Like I think a lot of people are afraid of sharing anything that they feel is a little bit off, off policy, off brand, off company topics, basically. But I feel that's the only thing that gives you an edge, because everyone can just restate your company value. Absolutely. But no one will see you then. They will just think you're part of this company, of this brand, which is obviously true because you work there, right? But the people, if they want to connect with you and not just with the company, right? Or they want to connect with you for the sake of being connected to the company. You, I think, have to do something personal, right? Something that is aligned with you. And I think that will also be helpful when you apply to jobs. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, you brought the word up, authenticity, right? I feel like what is nowadays used as the opposite is professionalism, right? And it's often that thing, right? If you want to be more yourself, it doesn't seem professional anymore, right? Talking about GTA 6 at work. Or for me, showing up with a Super Mario sticker on my laptop, for example, right? Which I do because I'm a big fan of it, so why not show it? And it can feel like, oh, this doesn't seem professional. But who defines what is professional and what isn't, right? I know there are certain things you should not do, like being offensive and being really weird at work, right? Fine. That's definitely not professional. But how is bringing your personality to work unprofessional, right? Wasn't it always the case that our personalities made us different and successful? Yes. Because no one ever got ahead by being the same as the others, right? They were always the ones being different than the others. And that difference has to come from a place of your personality and who you are as a person, and not something that you're trying to imitate, because otherwise you're not yourself. You're actually just another version or less better version than the other person. So I completely agree with you, right? It's much more about finding your way, how comfortable you are, of showing your personality at work, because people are not stupid. They will sense it, right? They will sense when you're acting, and they will sense where you're yourself.
Sure.
And when you're yourself and you are someone who is still passionate and going ahead and having great thoughts and ideas, and you are a right person to work with, then that will surely get you ahead. And instead of then no one knowing what you stand for, at least everyone knows what you stand for because you are yourself.
Yeah. And you brought up an interesting thing, because especially this, like, people will sense it. I sometimes have the feeling, though, that a lot of people who act very, let's say, artificial, very, like, professional in that sense, they don't notice that other people will notice. That it's not them, you know what I mean? And that always puts me off the most, when I have the feeling, you know, like I'm trying to expose my real me at the moment, but you're staying in this character, and I know for 100% certainty almost that in a different context you are not talking like this. So why don't you just talk the way that you talk, right? Because you can be still like respected for what you know, for what you do. But maybe, as you said, specifically because of how you did it. Like, just to give you one example, like I do a lot of trainings for clients. And unfortunately, let's say through the COVID situation and so on, post-COVID, right? A lot of that is online. And we all have been in online calls. And we all know that after a while, attention span decreases and everything like this. And I always think I did something good when, like, after like 2 hours of talking or something like this, right? I get emoticons in the chat, because I know people are still with me, you know, they laugh about something I did. It was maybe a bit like of a silly way of framing something, but at least I know they're still here, you know, they're still with me. And maybe we'll write a book at some point, Humanizing being a human being in the workplace.
That's so true. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Yeah, it's actually an interesting one with the online meetings too, right? Where, because it's easy for people to just shut down the camera and passively do something else, right? And just listen with one ear. That exactly getting any kind of attention and noticing people not doing something else and actually looking at you consciously is really interesting. The opposite is also when I go to conferences. It became now a good sign when people take out their phones and take pictures of the slides you're showing. Because at least you know that they think this might be worthwhile later on to check again. And you at least talked about something that's relevant for them. And not everyone displaying on their phones. It's so easy to be rude nowadays, huh? Right? It's just like people are always distracted, and keeping people's attention span is really important.
Yes. For sure. Cool. So I'm just looking at the time. It's 35 minutes. I always try to keep it like under 40. So what I maybe would want to know, I know you're like not very much older than I am. So I think like maybe thinking about what would you change in your life type of question is not the right time to ask this question, because we still have lots of time to make the right moves if we like did some things.
Right. Yeah.
But maybe one thing that would be interesting also with regards to other people seeking to get into this space, like, can you think of any, maybe also from what you see at your job, but maybe also at your clients where they get new people into the organization, any specific jobs or titles, like job positions you can think about that you have the feeling they're maybe a little bit underhyped, but actually quite in demand? Because we all know data sciences are needed, right? And then you have like one job, like and 500 people apply to it, might not be the easiest thing to do. But is there anything overlooked that you see where you think companies actually value that type of skill set, this type of job, and they're looking for this, but not people, lot of people know about it?
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't think it's gonna be role titles that are underhyped, because most of them are already now present, like data analysts, data scientists, as you mentioned. But the tasks are changing, right? And simply because the AI revolution is here now, the focus of the tasks is going to change. So for example, right, when data analysts were busy building dashboards for many, many years now, right? And everyone wanted to have dashboards. Over time, if the semantic layer and the data foundation is good enough, people don't need to use dashboards anymore, right? They're going to ask a chatbot what the metrics are from the current day compared to the day before, and it will just tell them. And then you set up a weekly reminder to always tell you proactively once per week. You don't have to go to a dashboard to click anymore, right? You just kind of wait until it's being told you, and that's good enough. So the analyst doesn't have to be a super expert in building dashboards anymore. It has to be more a translator for the data structure into making it ready for a conversational chatbot to be on top, right? So become more of a translator and more of a modeler rather than an analyst. But you're still an analyst because you need to be the subject matter expert of understanding what the data means, right? So I think more getting in touch with AI-based working and AI-supported data analysis or data work at all is really important. And my advice would only be don't stand still, right? Always try to grow and go with what is now new possibilities to do things and build your strength on there. It's easier than ever to learn new things nowadays because there's so many different formats to be able to use to. So find your own style of learning, grow, and apply it as soon as you can at work.
Yeah. Okay. That's a cool tip. And would you say, or what would you say to people who would want to follow you, or why should they follow you? What's your USP? Why follow Tiankai?
I mean, I think I try to make complex and dry topics more fun and approachable, right? And I use that with music, as we talked about. I do that also with memes. I like to tell jokes as well. And all of that usually have like a serious background, though. So, right? So if you are more of an audiovisual learner and you like to take things not so seriously, but want to still learn about important stuff around data and AI, then please follow me on LinkedIn, right? And get in touch with me or watch more of my music videos on YouTube as well. That's also nice.
Okay, perfect. Then, thank you very much. I wish you good rest of the day and see you in another call, okay?
Yeah, thank you. You too. Bye-bye.